Let's take a look at configuring some sliders in our Tessera. I've already created an interface which has 8 sliders corresponding to 8 different groups. Let's take a look at the programming. I'm going to go to my trigger pane and I'm going to add a new trigger. This time we'll be using the MTPC slider move. Once this is placed, I can come over to the configuration side and select a slider. If I select my window and press Tab, it'll give me a list of all of my sliders. I'm going to come down to my slider 1 and select that. I'll add a new action, and the action I'm going to choose here is Set RGB. For these particular sliders, I just want them to actually control intensity. And since these aren't masters, I want to create light for it, I'm using the Set RGB instead of the master intensity action. I don't particularly care about red, green, and blue right now, so I'm going to deselect those. I just want to control intensity. I'm going to come up to my group and select a group from my drop-down list. My intensity is going to be a variable. Whenever you change a slider on a Tessera, it will capture the value the slider is left at as a variable. By default, this is variable 1. So I'm going to come down here, and instead of having it go to a firm 255, I'm going to change it to variable and use variable 1. So now, whenever slider 1 goes up and down, my group 1, my left trees, will also go up and down. Before we upload our configuration, I want to make one more change. I'm going to go to the Interface tab, select my slider for group 1, and change its startup value to be 0. Since this is a slider I'm using to add light to stage, I want to make sure it starts at 0 so it's in the right place. Let's go ahead and upload this config and take a look. I can now grab my first fader, raise it up, and the intensity of my group 1 will raise. This is great if you're just using one fader, but I've got a number of them, so I want a slightly faster method. Let's go back to our Interface tab. The first thing I'm going to do is select all of the rest of my sliders and set their startup values to be 0. Notice that the keys on my sliders follow a pattern. Slider 1, slider 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. I'm going to correspond this directly to my group numbers. So if we go back to our trigger tab, there's a faster way to do this. Instead of listening to slider 1, I want to listen to all of my sliders. So I'm going to delete my 001 and add in a variable capture. Less than, 3D, greater than. What this is going to do is listen for any slider followed by 3 digits to be moved. Once that slider is changed, that number is captured. That is going to be my first variable. The second variable that's captured is the position of the slider. So let's make a couple of little changes to our actions. 1, instead of running on a specific group, I want to run on a variable. Since the number that it's captured is our first variable, I want this to be number 1. The position of the slider, which I'm going to directly correlate to intensity, is now my variable 2. So I can come over here and change this from variable 1 to variable 2. Let's go ahead and upload the config and see what happens. Looking at our Tessera, now all 8 of our sliders have a startup position of 0. I can now come here, grab a single slider, raise it up, and set information for any of my groups. If I want to make changes to which slider controls groups, I can easily do that inside of my Interface tab. I'll go back to my Interface tab, select a slider, and change it from something like group 1 to group 3. I'll update my caption so I know which one I'm working on, and I'll update my key so Mosaic knows which one I mean. Now I can select my group 3 and maybe change that back to 1. Once I upload this, we can take a look at the changes. If I look at my Tessera, I will now raise my new slider 1, which is group 3, and control my third group. This allows me to easily rearrange the faders on my touchscreen to be whatever I want. If we take a look back at our trigger, we'll notice that it's capturing 3 digits. This means this will work from slider 001 to slider 999, allowing you to very easily and very quickly add whatever sliders you want. If you wanted to control fixtures instead of groups, all I'd have to do is change target here from group to fixture. That would allow me to directly control all of my fixtures based off their fixture number that has been defined in the Layout tab. Keep in mind that all of your triggers have an option for name and description, and it might be a good idea to write down what you've done.